In this video, we'll be taking a look at how you schedule an appointment for a group or a couple. We'll also show you how you go about invoicing for a couple session or group session after the fact. So I'm currently logged in. I'm looking at our timeline calendar, which shows all of our available therapists on the left as well as their available time slots across the top. For this example, I'm going to be scheduling a couple session for this therapist here named Chelsea. So I'm going to go to this available 9 a.m. time slot in her schedule and double click. That shows me the new appointment form, and the first thing I'll do is I'll click here to see all of her assigned clients. At this point, she's only got 2 clients, and these will be the subjects of our counseling session. So I'm going to go ahead and select the first client here. Then I'll just simply click in this window again to get the other one. I'll go ahead and select Homer here. So we now have these 2 clients selected for this counseling session. I'll go ahead and verify the start date. I can verify the duration. I can change that if I want to, or set it. I'll go ahead and set it for 60 minutes. I can elect whether or not this would be a repeating occurrence. I'm going to go ahead and just leave it as a single occurrence for now. I can then go over and put in any notes for this session. I'm going to go ahead and say their first couples counseling session. And down below I've got the service type entered by default. I can click edit if I want to change that. I'm going to go ahead and leave it at psychotherapy 60 minutes. And if I wanted to change the service amount, I could do that here as well. I'm going to leave it at a nice round number of $100 so we can take a look at that during the invoicing portion of this video. So once I'm happy with everything here, I'll go ahead and just click Save. Okay, and I can now verify that it's on the calendar. I see the 9 o'clock time slot for Chelsea with Marge and Homer Simpson attending. So now what we're going to do is we're going to jump over to the home page so we can see the process of checking these 2 in for their session and how the invoicing would happen after that as well. So let's come over here and click Home to get to the dashboard. Okay, so now we're on the dashboard. We're looking at our daily appointments. If I go to the 9 a.m. time slot, you can see I've got Marge and Homer Simpson coming in at 9 to 10 a.m. The staff that they're here to see is Chelsea, and the note here, their first couple counseling session. So if you can imagine for a second, these 2 have just walked into our practice and they're ready for their appointment. Your office manager or front desk person would then go ahead and check them in. Just come over here to the check-in button and we'll mark this particular appointment as kept, so we'll save that status. Okay, we get our kept flag here. So now TherapyZen will actually allow you to invoice for this service. It assumes that this service has been performed, so invoices can now be created for that particular service. So to get started with the invoicing, what we'll do is we'll go ahead and go to Homer's record here. I'll click his name to go to his profile. When I get to Homer's record, I just simply come up here to the ledger. And because this was their first appointment, they don't have any open invoices or paid invoices, but I do have $100 uninvoiced. That would be that session that they just completed, and it's now ready to be invoiced. So if it had been decided that Homer was going to pay for this session, I would just simply come over here and say Create Invoice. And sure enough, here we see services to be invoiced. I can confirm the time and the date, as well as the service type that was performed and the amount. And if Homer was in fact going to pay for this, I would go ahead and click Save Invoice. That would generate an invoice, and then we could go ahead and collect payment from Homer. However, if it was decided that Marge was actually going to pay for this session, if I go to Marge's account, let's go ahead and do that now. I'll just come up here to the client search and type her name in. Okay, there she is. I'll click her record and we'll go to her record. Okay, and when I get to Marge's account, I'll go to her ledger. And sure enough, there's $100 that has not been invoiced yet. She's got an outstanding fee of $100, just like Homer did. So let's go ahead and go with the idea that Marge is going to pay for that couple's counseling session. I'm going to go over here to the top right and create an invoice. And just like we saw on Homer's record, here's the service to be invoiced. You can verify it's the same date and time, the same service type, and the same rate. So I'm going to go ahead and create the invoice so we can take payment. So I'll go ahead and say Save Invoice. Okay, that returns me back to her ledger, and I can see the invoice has been created. I've got an invoice number, a date, the service dates, as well as details about the actual invoice, how much was invoiced, how much we've received thus far, and her actual balance on this invoice, which is $100, because she hasn't paid yet. And speaking of payment, once we're ready to go ahead and take payment, I could just come up here and say Accept Payment by clicking that button. This shows me any open invoices for this particular client. Let's say I'm taking payment for it. I'll go ahead and enter the payment amount of $100 and say Save Payment. Okay, so I'm returned back to her ledger once again. Now that shows up as a paid invoice. It's got a balance of 0, tells me how much was invoiced and how much was received. If I look at her ledger details, she's got nothing outstanding, no services yet to be invoiced. We have received $100 from her, and her current balance is 0. So now you're probably wondering, well, what is showing up back on Homer's account where he had the $100 outstanding? Okay, well, let's go back over to Homer's account and take a look. I'm just going to come over here to the left and look at our recently viewed clients list, and I'll click on Homer's name here. Once I get to Homer's account, I'll click the ledger. And right away, you can see that he has got nothing uninvoiced and no balance. Because Marge was included in that session and paid for it, those outstanding charges have been removed from Homer's record. If I even come up here and try to create an invoice for it, you'll see there's no services to be invoiced. So that's how TherapyZen works in the background to make sure that people aren't being double charged, or to make sure that couples or groups are being charged correctly, especially in most of those cases where one person is primarily paying. If you did have a rare case where you wanted to split the charges, I could have done that as well, where Marge could have paid $50, Homer could have paid the other $50, and those numbers would have showed up correctly on their ledgers as well as their outstanding balances. So that's a real quick walkthrough of scheduling a couple, as well as how you'd go ahead and invoice for that session.